I love to do this because when I started doing logosynthesis, I was a writer and I had a book contract, but I got so interested in logosynthesis, I kept putting the book aside. Meanwhile, I was teaching logosynthesis 101 or whatever you call it. We had created some classes, and one of my participants was in a program where she had a whole lot of writing to do and had not done it, and was afraid she wasn't going to make the deadline or anything. And then one day she came in just glowing and said, I did it. And I said, what? She said, well, I used logosynthesis about all the writing that I hadn't done, and I did everything. It's a stack about 3 inches tall. And it was like, oh, here's another use for logosynthesis. And then about a month later, I was very close to the deadline for having to get the first draft done. Okay, that thick, 30,000 words. Now, I had done the research, I was ready to write, and I completed the first draft, 30,000 words, in 1 month while carrying a full schedule. And every time I sat down to write, I said, I retrieve all of my energy from anything that's blocking me from writing this book. And it worked. And I was thrilled. Well, I'm in writers' communities. And so I would see people having all kinds of blockages, all kinds of things. And I would say, come over here, let's go talk. And we talk for a few minutes and I'd figure out what the block was. And, without any formal logosynthesis explanation or anything. And I would say, do you want to try something? And what happened was over and over again, it was like, yeah, sure. And over again, different kinds of blocks got released. And so it's like a fantastic tool. And then just the first of the year, I saw a listicle article on the web, and it said, poor writers, they have all of these problems. They struggle with procrastination and writer's block and finding time to write and fear of failure, also fear of success, finding ideas, getting started, getting stuck. And so every one of those things, people experience regularly. And of course they had, little things of what you could do instead. And the what you can do instead sometimes works, or it works for a while. And I have always likened logosynthesis to, you can pull your automatic steering back. You can pull it off course and take it the way you want it to go, but it's going to pop back up. So every one of those ideas about what to do is in that category. Takes the thing and it takes it over there. And boop, soon it's back. Long before I learned logosynthesis, I had a whole bunch of those writing blocks. And in one case, I started writing, I wrote for my high school newspaper. That's how long I have been writing for one kind of publication or another. So went to a class, and in that class, we talked about how people learn to write. And it's no wonder that so much energy is tied up in how we learn to write. If you think about it, the first thing you do, I mean, when you're little, you scribble freely and it's fun and you love it. It's great. And then somebody gives you some lines and they say, write in these lines, and you struggle. And there's a huge reward for not being you. There's a huge reward for not being yourself. It's for adapting, for doing what's right. And if you don't, there's all kinds of criticism. You know, you've got to do it again. You've got to do it again. So that's the first rule. And then you get a little bit older and you have to learn how to spell. Oh my God. And not just spell, but all those funny little marks, those grammar marks. Fortunately, I didn't have to learn those. So I never learned how to spell either, but that's okay now. My mother was correcting my papers through high school to turn them in without spelling mistakes. Then in college, I always had somebody help. And use proper grammar. Say it correctly. Know whether you have a subject and a predicate. Know what order things go in. So you've got rule upon rule upon rule upon rule. Use proper paragraphs. Tell them what you're going to tell them. And do an introductory paragraph, and then 3 more, and then a wrap-up paragraph. No room for creativity, no room for being yourself. Just learn the form, do the form. And then the final thing is think before you write. Which to me, I mean, once it made sense. And as usual, something that makes sense for one generation becomes a rule for the next. I mean, once paper was scarce, writing materials were scarce, you had to think very carefully, or we excavated a typewriter the other day and showed it to our newly college graduated kids. And they were, oh, look, oh, do that. And oh, you got to type there, and it's so hard. And so you had to learn that. And of course, if you made a mistake, you'd either have to start over or put in the erase or something like that. So it was really, really hard. So think before you write. Always write on a clean piece of paper. I mean, you have to do that. The rules were coming out of the woodwork, and every time you'd start to follow one, you'd break the rule and you'd freeze. So the energy got frozen. So the result, of course, is the struggles in school. I have watched at least one of my grandchildren freeze, just he can't do it. He never could. Another one hates to write, which is pretty common. What happens is you're faced with a blank screen or a blank paper. And all of a sudden, anybody who's ever criticized you in the past about your writing, anything that was graded, anything where you got red marks, anybody get red marks all over their papers? Get red marks all over your papers. I mean, no. And so you're scared of that happening. And so that freezes. Another thing that writers do is, instead of writing, they think about how every sentence is formed. And they go back on one sentence at a time to make it perfect. And you can do that forever. I have a friend who's an editor, and she says, you'll make yourself crazy doing that. That's what you have an editor for. But if a writer has an editor, then it triggers all of the, I'm going to be criticized for what I did all over again. I was fortunate that the first time I read what the editor had done, it was, I had sent it in one way and it was in a magazine. I said, oh, this is really good. Did I write that? And there were subtle differences. Oh, wow. Oh, and I fell in love with my editor. So I was fortunate. Okay. Other things that people do is they agitate. Instead of writing, they do research, and then they do more research, and then they do more research. And then they do something and they start to write and they've got, oh, I've got to check that and make sure it's perfect. And of course, aiming for perfection is not getting it done. And as one of my writing mentors says, 3 to get ready, or 2 and to get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready, and never do anything. The other thing is you have to do it yourself. There's a rule that says, if you ask for help, you're cheating. You know, you have to do it all by yourself. And a new writer or an experienced writer, somebody who's trying to get published, somebody who's trying to get into a magazine, there are tons and tons and tons of tricks about how to do it. Just information, like we learn logosynthesis, writing, publishing is a whole nother set of things that need to be learned. And people think, oh, well, I've got to get a publisher. Well, that was maybe the way it was when you learned when you were in school, but that's not the way it works anymore. And so people don't know about the new industry and are ashamed to ask for help, which doesn't make any sense either. Another interesting problem is we learn in school to write in a very formal style. And I once worked with a professor, really great guy, and he was totally blocked from writing in plain English. And what I got was he was afraid of being criticized by his colleagues. Like if he turned out something that you could read, it would be basically a sin in the academic world. And so we took the energy out of the image of his colleagues criticizing him. And he now has a book that is used in a textbook all over the world. So, I mean, I'm just thrilled about that one because he was so blocked. And he didn't know how to write in English either. He could talk just fine. It doesn't occur to people that there are ways to write besides taking your pen or your computer screen. There are lots of ways to get to say what you want to say. And those are some of the tricks of the trade. So he wound up talking most of his books, and it worked out just fine. So there are just an incredible number of possibilities. So my goal for helping writers, and particularly helping writers in the logosynthesis community, is to first have fun writing, because writing and thinking are best done simultaneously. I often write to find out what I'm thinking, which is useful. The other thing is get help when you need it, or even when you don't need it, find other writers, ask people. And what I would love is to help people publish as many books and articles as they want to, be a resource for people to do that. So one of the next things I'm going to do is do not a webinar. What is it, Kathy? A seminar?
A workshop.
A workshop.
Yeah.
Okay. Take your next step as a developing writer. And that's Friday, February 4th from noon to 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, wherever you happen to be. So I think it's time for questions now.